You feel weird in most rooms now, not superior, just misaligned. You walk in, and something inside you shrinks without meaning to. You listen, you nod, you smile, but it's like you're floating just slightly above the moment, not quite touching ground, not quite invited in. It's not that you don't belong, it's that you're no longer willing to abandon yourself in order to fit. There was a time you could shapeshift to stay close, lower your light, blur your edges, laugh at what didn't feel funny just to stay part of the noise. But something in you won't let you do that anymore. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened inward. You've become too honest with yourself to keep playing small, and still the guilt lingers, the ache of not being understood, the slow, quiet grief of outgrowing what once felt like home. People don't see that you're not trying to be intense or deep or different. You just are. The truth has changed your chemistry. You're not intimidating. They're just not ready to meet their own reflection in your clarity. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment. And what you're feeling now, that loneliness that doesn't quite have a name, it's not a defect. It's not punishment. It's vibrational recalibration. You are not alone. You are being rewired. As Neville Goddard once said, you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what you are is changing. You used to crave connection through similarity, but now you're starting to feel the pull toward resonance. The people, the places, the energies that meet you where you've actually landed, not where you used to pretend to be. Joe Dispenza teaches us that as your electromagnetic field becomes more coherent, it begins to repel everything that thrives on noise, drama, and emotional codependency. Not because you're rejecting others, but because your nervous system is choosing peace. It's a quiet evolution, one that doesn't make headlines, but it changes everything. And it brings with it an old fear. What if no one recognizes me anymore? What if I become unrelatable? What if I'm too much for the places I used to love? Before we go deeper, take a moment to breathe. Let the tension drop. You're not broken, you're simply remembering. And now we're ready to begin. It's disorienting, isn't it? The way people seem to pull back just as you begin to feel more whole. You start speaking from a deeper place, and suddenly they stop calling. You stop apologizing for your clarity, and their smiles grow thinner, more distant. It feels personal. It feels like rejection, but it's not. Not in the way you think. They're not avoiding you. They're avoiding what rises in them when they're near you. Your presence now is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look. Your calmness makes their chaos louder. Your inner alignment exposes their hidden contradictions, not because you're pointing fingers, but because you've stopped performing. That alone can feel threatening to someone still relying on masks. You've become a kind of truth serum, silent, potent, undeniable. You don't need to say much. Your energy speaks volumes, and what it often says is, there's more than this. That kind of frequency is magnetic, but it's also uncomfortable. Not everyone wants to awaken. Some just want to sleep a little longer, wrapped in the familiar noise. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with this stage. You're no longer chasing validation, and yet you still miss being held. You understand why people are pulling away, but it doesn't mean it hurts less. You may even find yourself questioning, did I do something wrong? Am I being too intense? But no, your coherence is not aggression. Your groundedness is not arrogance. It's just that the room you're walking into is still calibrated to static, and you've become a clear signal. Imagine someone who chooses sobriety or peace or self-respect after years of playing the same role in a group that survives on dysfunction. They don't even have to say a word. Their very being begins to disrupt the script. That disruption is truth, and most people don't know how to stay with it. The subconscious can only sustain resonance it recognizes, When it meets a frequency it doesn't yet understand, it retreats, not out of hatred, out of survival. So no, don't chase what you've already vibrated out of. Let it go with compassion, not bitterness. You're not abandoning them, you're honoring your evolution. And the more you do, the more space you create for new connections, built not on similarity, but on resonance. There's a certain weight that settles into your chest when you start seeing what others are not yet ready to see. It's not just mental fatigue, it's not just emotional exhaustion, it's the ache of carrying awareness in a world still addicted to avoidance. You notice things, not just details, but patterns, energies, underlying motives. You hear what people aren't saying, you feel the dissonance behind their words. And even when you try to stay light, to float on the surface with them, something in you sinks, because shallow has become unbearable. You've tasted depth, and now the surface feels like starvation. It's a particular kind of burnout, not from doing too much, but from feeling too much in places that can't meet you. You want connection, deeply, fiercely, but not just any connection. You want truth, presence, realness, and that kind of communion is rare, especially in spaces where performative light is mistaken for wisdom and busyness is mistaken for purpose. You've probably heard it before, that if you're spiritual, you should always be available, always kind, always open, but that belief that you must stay accessible to everyone is how so many sensitive, awakened souls end up in quiet despair. Because being awake doesn't mean being barbarous, it doesn't mean self-abandonment for the sake of inclusion. The truth is, you're not here to dilute your frequency to make others comfortable. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to embody what others have not yet remembered, not by preaching, not by persuading, simply by being. Neville Goddard reminds us, you can only lift others by embodying the state they haven't yet reached, not by lowering yourself to meet them, but by holding your alignment so clearly that it becomes a silent invitation. There's grief in this, too. The kind of grief that comes with watching people you love choose distraction over depth. And yet, there's freedom. The moment you realize you are not required to stay in rooms that require you to shrink. Your availability is sacred. Your presence is sacred, and you do not owe it to everyone. You don't need to harden to protect your peace. You only need to stop leaking energy into spaces that never truly saw you. Let yourself step back, not in bitterness, but in reverence. Because this isn't disconnection, it's restoration. You've started to dread the invitations, not because you don't care, but because your body responds before your mind can explain. A tightening in your chest, a dull pressure in your temples, a wave of fatigue before the event even begins. What you're calling social exhaustion might not be exhaustion at all. It might be your frequency doing the talking, saying no before you override it with politeness. We've been taught to push through, to smile anyway, to be pleasant even when something inside is quietly screaming. But what if your nervous system isn't malfunctioning? What if it's becoming more intelligent, more selective? What if the tension you feel isn't a flaw, but a filter? You're not anxious, you're shedding, you're not disconnected, you're refining. Your field, your emotional, energetic field, is no longer compatible with places that run on performance, noise, and unspoken contracts of emotional self-betrayal. And still, you try. You force positivity. You rehearse small talk. You pretend not to notice the undercurrents that others ignore. But it costs you something. It always does. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be a sponge for everything around you. That was survival. That was adaptation. But you've evolved. You're becoming a signal tower, broadcasting instead of absorbing, holding instead of leaking. As Joe Dispenza teaches, when you combine elevated emotions with a clear intention, your electromagnetic field changes. It sharpens, it strengthens, and it becomes less porous. Not because you're closing off, but because you're tuning in. You begin to realize not every room deserves your openness. Not every frequency deserves access to your nervous system. There's discomfort here, yes. Expansion always brings friction, but this is not the discomfort of dysfunction. It's the discomfort of clarity, of no longer forcing alignment where none exists. Sit with it, the awkwardness, the emptiness, the quiet urge to fill the space. Sit with all of it and notice, beneath the noise, there is peace, a peace that doesn't depend on performance, a peace that isn't earned through tolerance. You're not falling apart, you're falling in. There's a strange kind of silence that begins to surround your life as your frequency rises. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of no longer being pulled in every direction. The silence of not needing the chaos to feel alive. The silence of clarity. You used to find energy in the noise, the chatter, the drama, the urgency of the small things. They used to stimulate you, give you a sense of movement. Now, those same patterns feel empty, not wrong, not bad, just hollow, like echoes in a space you've already left. You might wonder, why don't I care anymore? But that question misses the truth. It's not that you don't care, it's that your care has matured. It's become precise, focused, aligned. You're not detached, you're refined. What once felt like connection now feels like static. What once lit you up now feels like a performance you've already outgrown. You're not apathetic, you're discerning, and the world around you hasn't quite caught up with that distinction. It's easy to misread this phase as depression, to assume that the absence of thrill must mean something is wrong. But in truth, this is the beginning of a deeper aliveness, one that doesn't need to be entertained to feel meaning, one that finds richness in stillness, that drinks from silence like water. Your dopamine system is shifting, your nervous system is recalibrating. The highs that once hooked you no longer penetrate, and that's not numbness, that's clarity. When you stop feeding off chaos, the body needs time to reset. It will feel dull at first, quiet, but within that quiet, something ancient begins to wake, a deeper rhythm, a steadier pulse, one that doesn't spike and crash, but sustains. Instead of asking, why do I feel empty? Try asking, what have I outgrown energetically? Because this emptiness isn't a void, it's a clearing. And from that clearing, something new, something honest, is preparing to emerge. There is a silent kind of rage that lives beneath the surface of awakening. It's not loud, it's not reckless, it's precise. It rises when you are overlooked, spoken over, or dismissed, not for who you were, but for who you've become. You've outgrown the version of yourself who tolerated too much, and now something in you recoils at even the smallest acts of disrespect, not because you are reactive, but because you are awake. This anger, this fire, it's not dysfunction, it's memory. Your nervous system remembering what it feels like to matter. Your energy field refusing to bend where it once folded. Anger, when unexamined, can become destruction, but when witnessed fully, honestly, it becomes direction. It tells you where your soul has been compressed, where your voice was swallowed, where your worth was negotiated away in the name of peace. You were taught to call this anger a problem, to spiritualize it out of existence, to be soft, forgiving, always understanding. But sacred anger doesn't destroy, it protects. Even monks, cloaked in stillness and devotion, carry swords in their iconography, not to harm, but to guard the clarity that gives life to their stillness. Your clarity deserves the same. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this, for sensing the subtle violation when someone speaks to the version of you that no longer exists, for withdrawing when your boundaries are not respected. That is not cruelty. That is coherence. Write it out if you need to, not to vent, but to reveal. Let the anger become a map, where it lives in your body, where it stirs in your memories, where it points towards something sacred that was once silenced. This is how resentment becomes wisdom, how fury becomes fuel. Your anger is not asking you to hurt anyone, it's asking you to stop hurting yourself in the name of harmony. Let it speak, and then let it guide you, not back to who you were, but forward, into the standards your soul has been silently waiting for you to claim. It's not the volume of your energy that unsettles people, it's the precision, the coherence, the absence of distortion. You walk into a space, and without saying a word, you transmit truth. Not perfection, not superiority, just truth. In a world that has become so accustomed to pretending, you've likely been told, in one way or another, that your energy is too much, too intense, too sharp. But if you listen closely, what they're really saying is, you're too clear for my confusion. You're not too high, you're too honest, too grounded in your own frequency to play the game of polite disconnection, too attuned to pretend you don't notice what's really going on beneath the surface. There's a myth that being high vibrational means being endlessly sweet, soft-spoken, agreeable, but high vibration is not about pleasantries, it's about alignment. Alignment with your heart, with your truth, with the deeper intelligence that moves through you when you stop performing and start listening. Greg Braden speaks of heart-brain coherence, the electromagnetic harmony that occurs when your emotions and your thoughts are no longer in conflict. That coherence is what you're radiating now, not because you've perfected yourself, but because you've stopped lying to yourself. And that honesty, that inner clarity, sends a ripple. It amplifies, it sharpens, it doesn't conform to the emotional contracts of false harmony. You've stopped nodding when you mean no. You've stopped laughing when you feel hurt. You've stopped pretending you don't see what's broken, simply to be accepted by those still invested in illusion. That's not rebellion, that's evolution. Don't confuse intensity with aggression. Your field isn't loud, it's clear, and clarity can be confronting, especially to those still tangled in their own noise. So don't lower your signal to make others feel safe in their distortion. Sharpen it, refine it, let it ring clean, because coherence is not cruelty, it's kindness, the kind that liberates, the kind that doesn't just soothe, but transforms. Attraction is magnetic. It happens in an instant, a pull, a resonance, a shimmer in the energy field that says, yes, there's something here. But what you're learning now, often painfully, is that resonance is not enough. Attraction will bring people into your life, but only congruence will keep them there. You've likely felt it, the deep connection that appears quickly, that sense of recognition, of being seen, heard, met, and then, just as quickly, the collapse, the tension, the misalignment that follows when the outer charm doesn't match the inner truth. So many are drawn to your light, but light doesn't just illuminate, it exposes. And when your presence begins to reflect someone's shadows, not everyone stays. This isn't failure, this is frequency intelligence. Neville Goddard said it clearly. Creation doesn't respond to want, it responds to being. It responds to what you are, consistently, not just what you say, not what you hope for, but the vibration you embody when no one is watching. That's congruence. And it's rare, because it requires more than potential. It demands integration, alignment between thought, emotion, behavior, and presence. Many will be magnetized to your energy, but only those who have built a similar coherence, who have faced their own contradictions, honored their own evolution, will be able to stand in the full truth of your presence without retreating. There's grief in this, to meet someone in resonance, only to lose them in incongruence, to feel that initial click, and then watch it unravel because the deeper alignment was not yet embodied. It's tempting to stay, to shrink, to compromise coherence for companionship. But you've done that before, and you know the cost. So wait, not with coldness, but with clarity. Wait for the stillness after the click, the calm after the chemistry, the presence that doesn't waver when the shadows rise. That's not fantasy. That's resonance refined by reality, and it doesn't come often. But when it does, it stays, not because of force, but because of truth. You're not too much. You're simply no longer willing to abandon your soul to be digestible. And that, in a world addicted to comfort and compromise, will often be misunderstood. This phase, where you feel both clearer and more alone, is not exile, it's refinement. You are not being punished. You are being prepared, pulled inward, tuned, calibrated to the frequency of who you truly are, beneath all the inherited expectations and silent agreements that once dictated your presence. Yes, it can feel like isolation, but what if it's not loneliness? What if it's protection? What if the silence is sacred? As Bruce Lipton teaches, your beliefs are not just thoughts. They're programs shaping biology, perception, and ultimately, reality. And when your inner vibration shifts, your external world must follow, not by magic, but by design. It's not just belief, it's biology. The field adapts to you, not the other way around. And Greg Braden reminds us, the field is not passive, it is responsive. It doesn't obey the ego's desires. It reflects resonance. It answers to the deep, felt signal of who you've become. So if life feels quiet now, if connections fall away, if recognition feels scarce, trust this: you're not fading, you're distilling, you're not a lighthouse in the fog. You are the recalibration of the entire coastline. You don't need to chase visibility. You only need to remain true, because the ones who are meant for your frequency, they don't need to be convinced. They feel you, instantly, silently, fully, and for them, you'll never be too much. You'll be home. If this spoke to the part of you that's been quietly evolving, don't stay invisible. Drop a comment, share your shift, and subscribe, not for trends, but to stay in resonance with people who get it.